excited and grateful to have you here, Sands, as our honored guest. It's a challenge, I think, for anyone, especially for me, to give you a proper introduction because you do so many things and you do them so well. He's an author, of course, in multiple genres, fiction, with a novel called Catching Heaven, the memoir we're going to be hearing about and from today, Reclaiming My Decade Lost in Scientology, as well as a beloved craft book for writers, Tools of the Writer's Craft. Sands is also a playwright, a director, and an actor, working with plays that run the gamut, right? From Shakespeare to modern works, and I assume your own. She's a singer, a songwriter, and a musician. She's a teacher at conferences such as the Community of Writers at Squaw Valley, where a number of you may have met her, worked with her, heard her sing, as I did 5 or 6 years ago. It's a wonderful experience. She's also Professor Emeritus. Is that how you say it? Emeritus? I don't know. At Franklin and Marshall College, where she also edits the Alumni Arts Review. And I do want to point out, and we can throw it in the chat at some point, go to her website too, sandshall.com. There's lots of nice reviews, links to essays, links to songs, listen to her music, links to where you can purchase her books and her CD, Rustler's Moon, is that right?
Correct.
And that's actually the song that you sang, when you do the performances at the end of Squaw, you sang that song that evening, and that was just lovely. So very memorable for me. With that, Sue and I, we're going to ask Sands a few questions. And I think I have the first one, huh? It's kind of a general catch-all. And if you read Sue Staats' wonderful interview with Sands on the Stories on Stage Sacramento blog just from about a week ago, it's sort of a repeat. But if you haven't read that, and even if you have, I think it's a good, kind of reminder and opportunity to hear Sands talk about. So the question is, if you could tell us about the impetus for reclaiming my decade lost in Scientology, after keeping your involvement with Scientology kind of a guarded thing that you didn't want to talk about or, say the word for many, many years, what broke that logjam for you and started the pen moving and started you realizing this was a story you had to tell? So that's my question.
Thank you. And Dorothy, thanks for that lovely and very inclusive introduction. I was quite touched by it. Thank you. And I'm just so honored to be amongst the writers whose works are being presented by Stories on Stage. And so thank you, Shelley and Dorothy and Sue for starting this all, and Jessica, and very much for Kelly, who's going to read. I'm very excited to see what she comes up with. So thank you for that wonderful question. The whole idea really was basically this. I had the great opportunity at Franklin and Marshall College to teach a course called Introduction to Myth and Fairy Tale. And it was a course I'd devised. The English department had given me permission to teach it. And I was very intrigued by the fairy tale. And then I knew that one of the things I wanted to talk about when I got to the myth section was the hero's journey. And I would, every semester teaching the hero's journey to my students, I would be adamant about how important it was for them to take this idea away with them, that we leave the known world and we are drawn into a place that is often going to be dark. In fact, we often call it an underworld, and that down there in the underworld, if we just look at things just right and think about this idea, there's going to be a gift to be found in the underworld, a boon, as Joseph Campbell calls it, and that we can traipse then back up to the known world carrying this precious piece of information. And so I would speak just earnestly and vehemently about this. And every now and then it would come into my mind, is it possible, Sands, that Scientology was kind of an underworld for you, and that maybe there are things down there that, and before I could get very far with that, I would just say, no, it was just a big error. It was just a big mistake. But little by little, what I was saying to my students began to really come into my own psyche, actually. And I began to examine that. And I was already very interested in the idea of pilgrimages, being on pilgrimages, the fact that a pilgrimage is not about getting somewhere, but about the journey and what you experience on the way. So I was kind of priming my pump for that. And eventually I just began to write with that in mind, that maybe there was something to, as the title says, reclaim from a decade that up to that point I pretended just simply hadn't happened in my life, that I had just made a great big error. And instead, the writing of the book showed me that that wasn't the case. And I hadn't squandered those years. So that's how it started. And thanks for that fun question.
I love that. Actually, I think you wrote an essay that alludes to that or something about the hero's journey. And it just struck me. I think you said something like, really, any memoirist can look at what they've gone through as a hero's journey and write it from that perspective. And that gave me a great idea for how to teach memoir. So
yeah, I think it's a lovely thing to bear in mind. Yeah, there's something we can claim and get. Yeah.
So apt.
Thank you.
Sands, I had a question for you. Many people who write about their experiences in Scientology basically take a flamethrower to it, and they blow it up, and all you hear is how horrible it is and terrible. But your book does not do that, very interestingly. And I wonder if you can talk about your choice to be really, really fair and even-handed about what was good about Scientology and what was not good.
Thank you for the opportunity to address that. I feel very strongly about that, actually. I did read a number of other memoirs, although I didn't read them till I was close to finished with mine, that people who had addressed Scientology, because I didn't want to actually have my memories and my perspective swayed by other people's experiences. I wanted to try to make sure I'd gotten my own down to my own satisfaction before I looked at the experiences of others. And it did strike me that by and large, there was a flame-throwing aspect to many of those memoirs. They really, and there were a couple of things. One, I think there was a part of me that thought, well, why would you throw a flamethrower at something that you had believed in so thoroughly? Why not try to understand what brought you to that place, which was certainly what I was trying to do. But secondly, it was kind of an aspect of Scientology's sometimes, in my opinion, quite useful perspectives that have really stuck with me. And it was the idea that if you start complaining about somebody else's behavior, if you start really criticizing somebody else, you can almost always turn that view on yourself and see that problem in yourself. And I found that to be true so often. So when I was tempted to get really critical about it, and of course I was, because I felt I'd lost years and all that stuff, I decided, why don't you take a look at how that can be true? What you're flinging there, how can that be true for you? So in addition to wanting to draw the reader in to what it was that fascinated me, I mean, one of the best compliments I ever got was my editor saying to her boyfriend at the time, saying, I don't know if I want to continue reading Sands' book because she makes Scientology sound really interesting. Yeah. And not as dire as, and that was part of my want. Here's what intrigued me. Here's what I thought was useful. Here's why I kept wading deeper and deeper into that water. And many people have written to say, thank you. Now I know more about why my cousin or my sister or my brother found it so interesting.
Right. I felt that way too. I know Dorothy and I have a couple more questions, and I want to make sure to remind everybody else that please use the chat function to write down questions if you have them, because we definitely have time for them after we're finished with the readings. But Dorothy, I know you have another question.
Yes. So on your website, I'm plugging your website, I read an essay, I think it was in the LA Review of Books, is that right? Called Light a Candle.
Yes.
As reading that, you describe an episode that I don't think is in the memoir that fascinated me, where you wrote a beautiful song, but more than that, it sort of became an anthem for the church. And then you were to perform it in front of a large, prestigious group, and you literally lost your voice.
Yes.
And that stayed for a while, right? You weren't able to access your music, which seems so profound. And I'd like you to tell folks about that incident and what, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps on my head just repeating it. That must have been a thunderbolt. if you would talk about that.
Thank you for having read that essay. It was one of those many things that was in the book and out of the book and in the book and out of the book. Anyone who's worked on that, you understand. It's like, and then I thought it was an important story to tell, and I decided to write that essay. I was very grateful when the Los Angeles Review of Books decided to publish it. And in short, it's that there was this big court case in Portland in the middle to the late 80s that Scientology was really they were going to be hit with a huge fine, and every Scientologist from all over the world was told to show up in Portland and protest this court case. And so very protesting my protestation, I reluctantly got on the bus, and I was thrilled when it broke down halfway to Portland. Thrilled. Nobody else was thrilled, but I was thrilled. But I was sitting there in the bus station. Into my mind came this old phrase that we've all heard, but I had only really heard it recently for the first time, which was, "It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness." And just the only two songs in all of my time have ever come this way. It just floated into my mind, this light a candle for freedom, hold it up for all to see, spark a flame around the world to burn towards being free. And it was just like, I was pulled out my journal, I was scribbling so fast. And then I had a friend there who had sung with me, and I went over and sang it to her, and she added harmonies, and we had this great time. We got back from Portland, and I played it for Gail Moran, who happens to be the sweetheart of Chick Corea. That was the world that I was floating around with, which was part of what was so fascinating in my time in Scientology. And she said, "This is a really cool song. We should sing it for these protests," because Scientology had lost this court case up in Portland. And so they were determined, and they indeed got it thrown out for reasons that seem to be about the judge, but who knows. And so all of a sudden we're singing it, and I'm supposed to sing it with these two girls, these women on a stage. And indeed I get through, and I cannot make it through the song. I cannot hold my note, and it is absolutely excruciating and terrifying. And in fact, it wasn't till I was working on the final draft of the memoir that I even remembered it. That's what memory does. And so I really did lose my voice that day on stage, and then I really stopped playing much music. I put my guitar away. It didn't really come out of its case, except at the Community of Writers, when once a year I'd be asked to sing for the Follies, as those of you who know the Community of Writers know, and thank God for that, because otherwise I would really never play any music. So it was a really huge deal, and reclaiming my voice and being able to do as much of it as I have in the last 4 or 5 years with my singing songwriting has been enormous, just enormous. It's so much more than voice. It's just being able to speak. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Wow. It's freedom.
It is.
And hearing you sing that little bit was thank you so much. That was beautiful. And the song is on your website, a link to the recording, and it's on your CD. So after this, do listen to that. It's just beautiful. The harmonies, it's all voice, right? There's no instrumental. It's, what do they call it? A cappella. It's just beautiful.
And just really briefly to say what's so fun about that is that recording was when I was still in Scientology with the girls, the young ladies, not with Gail Moran, who took over the part for the production, but those women sang it with me. One of them has since left the church as well. And the person who recorded it had it on tape. That's how old it was. He did something called bake the tape, which is a way to get that stuff. And he uploaded it into the Sky, and we downloaded it into Ancient Wave Studios here in Nevada City. And that's how it got onto the album. It's just its own little miracle.
Wow. Wow. Well, it's still gorgeous after all these years, and knowing the story much more so,
Thank you.
How it meant one thing to them and another to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Sans, I know that there have been other books written about Scientology, and they have had a lot of blowback from the church. And also, I imagine, since much of this book is also about your family, and you are equally honest about them as you are about your experience in the church. And I'm wondering if you can share some of the reaction you've had from your family and from the church, and maybe from other people who, like you, were in Scientology for a while and now are out of it.
Yeah, I was, as I report at sort of the tail end of the book, there's a dream, a kind of waking dream I have where I dream that I'm in a tomb, upright in a tomb in a kind of V shape, and I'm aware of that this big rock's been settled into place over my head, and I don't have enough strength to lift it. And even if I could reach it, I realize I'm basically entombed, and that there is nothing I can do about it. This is a dream I'm having, and it's terrifying. And I realize it's about being able to speak, to actually publish this book. And I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Will the members of the church come after me? You know, they've been accused of terrible things, from throwing people's dogs into swimming pools to driving people off the roads to simply hassling them. They're on their social media or at their work. I mean, I actually went to my bosses at Franklin and Marshall College to say, you know, you might get some weird stuff coming in about me. And they said, we're grown up, so are you. You know, they were great. Good. So it's in describing this dream to a friend where I hear myself saying, I'm shut up. And the pun of being shut up comes through so clearly. And I burst out laughing and said, okay, I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going to shut up. So there was almost like this signal, publish this book. So then there was this shoe dropping, waiting moment, you know. Certainly when friends of mine who were still in Scientology heard about the book, and I was very much wanting, I'd gotten to be friends with them again as the years had gone by, very distant, polite friends, but friends. Mm-hmm. And as I was very much wanting to write each of them a note and say, I have given you a different name. I wanted to make sure you were safe in any way that could be seen. But I wrote this because this was my own experience, and I hope that, I knew they would not, but I was going to try. And well, one of the friends let the cat out of the bag, sent, you know, an email to all of them. And I got a message that basically said, because this is Scientology's, this is their terminology, they had to disconnect from me because I was not only disconnected myself from the church, but I was now saying bad things about it, bad things in terms of not loving it. So they said to me, this email said, you know, you are cutting the line to us down here. And I wrote back and said, it's not me cutting the line, it's you. But I understand why, as good Scientologists, you have to do that. Yeah. So that was hard because I wanted somehow to have my cake and eat it too, to keep those friends. I was very grateful in a way that my father had passed away by the time the book came out, though I think I'm very fair. And my mother had dementia, but she was still alive enough that when I brought a copy of the book, she could hug it to her chest and say, I knew you'd do it. I don't even think she knew what it was about, but she knew it was a book and that I'd written it, and that was enough. But that was very important. But I think my sisters have both, you know, they've both read it and said fairness and stuff. The only mischief that really was a very interesting moment is I got a message from a bookseller on Amazon who said, and he was a small bookseller on Amazon, who said, I have been told that your book violates copyright, and under the terms of my contract with Amazon, I can no longer sell your book. And you also must understand that when I tell Amazon this, or they get wind of it, they can no longer sell your book. Now I'm way into supporting your local bookstore, so it's okay. And I was very, you know, I didn't make any noise about it. I just told a few people, but by then, thank goodness, it had been out for about a year. And local bookstores could still order it from Ingram, and it was all just fine in that regard. It was just Amazon. And my publishers got on it. There was no answer, no pushback. I mean, they just didn't answer. So this thing just dragged on for months, and suddenly it was back on for sale again. So that's the only thing that happened. I mean, that I feel, you know, knock on wood, happened. But I think in many ways they just went to, if we give her publicity, it's publicity.
Right.
So they know that. They know about publicity better than anybody.
Yes, so. They do. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dorothy, you need to unmute yourself.
With that, I will ask Jessica to introduce our performer for the evening.
Very gladly. So I'm Jessica, the casting director. So our performer today is Kellie Raines, and I have the deep honor of introducing her because I have known her for a very long time. She's one of my closest friends, and she is an incredible performer, which you will see. But just to give you a little bit of her background, she's not only an actor, she's a director, she's a writer, she's a visual artist. She's an associate artist with KOLT Run Creations, for which she directed the Adoration of Dora. She's also performed with them many times in Escape from Happiness, Vinegar Tom, Antigone, and My Own Stranger. She's also worked with other local companies, including Big Idea Theater, Theater Galatea, which I actually run with my husband, and Resurrection Theater. And her visual art, she's an amazing painter and drawer, visual artist in general, but her art has been shown at Archival Gallery in Sacramento, and as well as on air in the PBS KVIE Art Auction. She actually works for KVIE, and she's read her poetry for the Poetry in Davis series, hosted by Dr. Andy Jones. She received her degree in dramatic arts from the University of California, Davis. And she can also be seen on air on KVIE. You guys have maybe seen her before if you're fairly local. She's been on air many, many times. And she'll actually have a piece in the upcoming art auction, which will be in early October. She'll have a piece of her art available, and she does beautiful, beautiful artwork. So make sure you check out our website. It's kellierainesart.com, and it's Kellie with an I-E. I know a lot of Kellys, and they all spell their name differently, so make sure it's an I-E. And without further ado, I'm very glad to introduce Kellie to do this reading.
Hello. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and start, and it's an honor before I do start. So can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yes. Yay. Thumbs up. I love it. Zoom thumbs up. So I am Kellie Raines, and this is excerpts from Reclaiming My Decade Lost in Scientology by Sands Hall. Her lovely face revealing nothing about the purpose or mood of our meeting, Jessica ushered me into her office and closed the door. On her desk lay a large red book embossed with gold letters. I recognized it. It was one of a set of over a dozen volumes that contained, in chronological order, all the policy letters and bulletins that L. Ron Hubbard had written regarding auditing, Scientology's form of counseling. A bookcase behind Jessica's desk held the set bound in red leather with a 2-inch gap where this one had been removed. Another bookcase held the equally large set of admin volumes bound in blue, which contained everything Hubbard had ever written about how to found and run an organization. Of course, Jessica kept these books close to hand. As head of a Scientology mission, the mission holder, she would refer to them often. Jessica emanated serenity. She wore simple, elegant clothes, black and tan and linen. Her long hair was as glossy as a raven's wing. She had unswerving faith in L. Ron Hubbard's technology. Yet even as she called the mission a center, choosing with purpose a less religiously charged word, even as she adhered to Hubbard's policies, she was never dictatorial. This was generally true of the Scientologists I'd come to know in my 5 years in the church. I found them reasonable, kind, ethical, straightforward, and sane. Through the church's hermetic seal, especially hermetic in 1987, pre-internet, whispers and speculation made their way. Someone who had done something wrong, gone out ethics, had been chained for days to a toilet in a brig, or forced to live in something like a gulag, eating rice and beans and doing menial labor. But these rumors had nothing to do with my own experience. Nevertheless, ever since the previous night, when, as I'd been finishing up my duties in the course room, Jessica had stopped in to request this meeting, I'd been anxious. I perched on the edge of a chair, swallowed and swallowed again. She took her place on the other side of the desk and, folding her hands on its glossy surface, said, "Sands, you need to be firmer in the course room." I nodded, a little dazed, wondering what I might have done wrong. My post at the center was as a course supervisor. A course supervisor does not teach. She oversees the study going on in the course room, and study that is entirely of materials written by Hubbard, making sure that students understand what they are reading. So what Jessica was referring to might mean that I had not been absolutely vigilant as I checked a student's understanding of one of Hubbard's policies and his letters. Or maybe it was that student, Skip, who'd had so much trouble with the training routines. The previous week, he'd enrolled in Success Through Communication course, but after just 2 nights, hadn't returned. I was haunted by the story he told me about a weekend retreat that was supposed to have taught him how to master fear, but instead seemed to have fried his brain. If I'd passed him on a drill when he wasn't ready to be passed, I might be responsible for whatever fragile mental state he might find himself in, even though he'd come to us in a pretty fragile mental state. The tech is the most precious thing, Jessica was saying, her dark eyes serious. You know that, Sands. If we're to keep Scientology working, we must apply it correctly. She reached for the book on her desk, opened it to a marked page, and swiveled the volume around so I could see it. I knew it well. An HCOPL, Hubbard Communications Office Policy Letter, written in February 1965, entitled Keeping Scientology Working. Jessica cleared her throat. We have sometimes since passed the point of achieving uniformly workable technology. She was either reading upside down or reciting. Many Scientologists memorized, word for word, chunks of what was known as the tech. The only thing now is getting the technology applied, she quoted. I understand, I said. She smiled. I'm sure you do. But I can hardly tell you to keep Scientology working without doing exactly what LRH says we must do if we are to keep Scientology working. I tried to smile back and bent my head to read the familiar words. This policy letter was the first thing you read each time you started a new Scientology course, which meant I'd read it about a dozen times. I see now that the first sentence makes a statement as if it's self-evident. We have sometimes since passed the point of achieving uniformly workable technology. And the other steps follow on that assumption. But at that time, I did not spot how this led the reader unquestioningly, at least in my case, into the second step. 2, knowing the technology. After which comes 3, knowing it is correct. 4, teaching correctly the correct technology. 5, applying the technology. 6, seeing that the technology is correctly applied. I looked up from the page and again said, I understand. And it was true that at about this far, I was usually able to follow Hubbard's thinking, even if I found it awfully arrogant. he alone had come up with the only possible technology. Still, although I might not agree it was the only correct technology, it did seem as if it might be, my knowledge was limited, a correct technology. I was not in the course room to teach the tech, but I was doing my best to make sure students understood it. I understood that applying the tech meant living your life more or less by Hubbard's policies and perspectives. Around this, I was definitely wishy-washy. My faith in the validity of everything Hubbard had ever written or said was in no way absolute. Some things actually scared me, but I did believe in the efficacy of a lot of it. However, the next 4 steps of keeping Scientology working really troubled me. That even though I'd glibly demonstrated my understanding of them, which certainly implied agreement any number of times, they were so adamant, I lowered my eyes to the page. 7, hammering out of existence incorrect technology. 8, knocking out incorrect application. 9, closing the door on any possibility of incorrect technology. 10, closing the door on incorrect application. Sans, Jessica said, we must, as LRH says, close the door on any possibility of incorrect application. I nodded, wondering what door of incorrect application I'd left ajar. And who had noticed? Who brought it to Jessica's attention? The only thing I could think of was Skip. Poor Skip. How on earth could he live with the images in his head? Jessica turned the page and pointed to a paragraph at the end of the document. The whole agonized future of the planet, every man, woman, and child on it, and your own destiny for the next trillions of years depend on what you do here and now with and in Scientology. I knew the rest of the paragraph. This was a deadly serious activity. If we didn't manage to get out of the trap now, we might not ever have another chance. The inherent hysteria made me roll my eyes just a bit. Humans had been on the planet a long, long time, which I also understood was part of Hubbard's point. If we falter in delivering the tech in a completely standard way, Sans, we risk losing it. Jessica's voice had the slightest wobble in it. It wasn't just that her own status as the mission holder was on the line if the center was found to be delivering anything other than standard tech. A terrifying idea for all of us involved. It was also the idea that under her watch, Scientology might not work as it was meant to work. I found this utterly noble and beautiful, even as inside the little cat of doubt I knew so well stretched a paw and yawned. We need you to be a zealot, Sans. I blinked. The blood in my veins came to a halt. A zealot? She nodded. My blood began to pump again. Actually, it lurched and spun as though my head roiled visions of men holding a gleaming scimitars in one hand and in the other, gripped by their long hair, the bleeding, lopped off heads of women. I saw horses screaming and rearing as the riders stormed through a crowd of unbelievers. I saw a little girl held by her ankles, whirled against a rock to smash her heathen forehead. I saw 100 Muslim bodies impaled on sharp poles left to writhe and die. I saw Christians opening their arms to welcome the hungry lions that, mouths agape, raced towards them across a Roman ring. At times, you are too gentle, Jessica said. I could only stare, caught up in the sight and sound and smell and filth of carnage in the name of faith. At times, you allow yourself to be swayed by someone you think of as stronger than you, or what I mean is, if you think they're smarter, especially if that person is male. I nodded. This was inarguable. My father, my brother, the man I'd married, Jamie, whose brilliance as a musician helped persuade me that he might also be brilliant about his chosen spiritual path, which is how I'd come to Scientology in the first place. My current sweetheart, Sky, was tenderer, but the quicksilver quality of his mind and his marvelous sense of humor caused me to sometimes wonder if his thoughts might be better than my own. Except for the volume open between us, the surface of Jessica's desk held only a photo in a frame and a small potted plant, and she ran a hand over the gleaming rosewood. Delivering the tech has nothing to do with being nice. Let me remind you, you're the one who pointed it out to me. The root of the word nice is foolish. Well, I said, ignorant anyway. You are not ignorant nor foolish, so don't be nice. I worry that you'd rather be liked than risk offending a student by sending him back to, say, restudy material. Again, I tried to think where I'd been lax. After taking the course, supervisor course, I had to do an internship in a course room, and I thought, I'm pretty good at telling people to restudy their materials if I felt they had to. Hubbard's study tech was an aspect of Scientology in which I completely believed. That's what I mean by zealot, Jessica said. If Scientology is applied standardly, we know it works. I thought about Skip. I wondered if the tech had helped him. I worried that by now he'd blown his brains out. This next section starts section 2 of the book. It would take decades to understand that when my brother fell off a bridge and so massively broke his crown, I not only lost him, I lost myself. I had shaped myself around his example, in some ways against it, for so long that when he wrecked his way, I wrecked mine. While he drank, smoked, screwed, tried everything, I sat in my ivory tower, meditating, writing often sad love songs, and drinking herbal tea. Even so, it was his lead I was following as he hacked his way through the forest, and I was grateful for that lantern glinting ahead amidst the looming trees. So when he fell and damaged his brain, and I lost the brother, my leader, my model, I plunged into a vertigo that So it seems now spun me directly toward the church. The idea that Scientology might offer answers may have been planted the day I attended a seminar given by a famous acting teacher visiting New York City. By this time, winter 1976, my brother and friends had formed the League of Theater Artists, exploiting Manhattan's current passion for raw, original, off Broadway theater. We were going about creating it in storefronts and basements, trucking props and set pieces around the streets and even subways of New York. In that group, often spearheading activities was Kate Kelly, a red-haired, vivacious beauty. I envied Kate's certainty about being an actor, with what sometimes seemed like conflicting interests and foci required by songwriting, theater, and writing. It was easy to worry that I was pursuing the wrong path. And Kate was always on the lookout for ways to better her craft. So she studied with the legendary Uta Hagen. With her encouragement, I auditioned for and was accepted into that class as well. She often invited me to join her for movement workshops or acting seminars. One morning, she phoned with an intriguing idea. This teacher's famous for finding acting problems, she said. We're too late to sign up to perform a scene, but at least we can watch and work with others while they perform theirs. We met up outside a studio on the west side and pretty much tiptoed into the space. A palpable, almost cathedral-like hush permeated the room. The acting area was an empty square created by rows of chairs. Into the square strode a thick-set man who radiated charisma. He made jokes about being a New York Greek now living in Los Angeles, how glad he was back to where there is weather. Settling into a chair, he said, "First scene." Two actors moved into the space, took a moment. To get situated, and began to speak. The teacher watched for just a few minutes before getting to his feet. "Why are you talking like that?" he said to the man. Like what? As if you have your teeth clenched. Why are you doing that? The woman in the scene melted into the audience. The actor began to visibly quiver. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. The teacher imitated him, not unkindly, making his jaw immovable and talking through and over it. As soon as he did, we saw what he'd observed, and we had not. There was a bit of laughter, flattened by a look from him. The actor flushed. I don't want. Come here. The teacher held out a hand, a big paw, and the room seemed to darken and focused around the acting space. It's as if someone has hold of you, your jaw. The actor backed up a few steps, shaking his head. It's just the fall I took when I was skiing a few years ago. I had to have stitches. The teacher studied him. Before that, the room was silent. Tears pooled in the actor's eyes. Again, he shook his head. Before that, the teacher said again. Just braces. I had to have braces like we all do when I was 12 or so. The teacher reached a hand and took hold of the actor's jaw. In front of us, the actor became a boy, and the boy led him. Before that. The The teacher moved the chin in and his hand gently from side to side. It's as if someone has hold of you. Does someone have hold of you? The boy began to cry, also to nod. The teacher released his jaw and waited. Just like you did, the actor finally said. He was weeping. She'd hold my chin and force the spoon in, and I tried to keep my mouth shut because I didn't want it. The teacher studied him. Let's be sure to talk later, he said. Next scene. The acting problems unearthed in the next few scenes weren't as dramatic, but everyone watching could see they were holding the actor back in some significant way. That was amazing, Kate and I raved as we joined the group bumping its way out of the room. Someone next to us said, "You know that guy's a Scientologist." "No," we said. "That stuff he was doing? That's Scientology." Horrified, Kate and I looked at each other. And as one, we shrugged. It was still amazing. And it was. He'd seemed to have located a buried memory that not only appeared to be holding the actor back from a successful career, but that might be affecting his whole life. I don't remember being aware of this teacher's name, Milton Katselas, but less than 2 years later, after I'd fled Manhattan for Los Angeles, I found my way, at the time, it seemed like mere coincidence, to his acting class. Done.
Wow, thank you, Kellie.
Ah,
Oh,
amazing.
that was just incredible.
Yeah, Sands, Kellie, how was that?
Well, I'm crying because of words.
Oh,
It's truly an honor to read not just beautiful prose, but such a personal story that is yours. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity, one, to be able to do it, but also that you've shared your story with us.
Kellie, you know, I'm an actor myself, as you know, and I think one of the, there's so many things I have to say, but amongst the things I just loved was that work we do as actors to find the words that really carry the weight in the sentence, and how you just had done that work so carefully and well without it ever seeming overdone, that it was just, you made it. There's this unbelievable list of things going up the chat, but I was trying to ignore because I was quite riveted to you. But it's just your degree of intimacy, the way you use the screen so well, really those kinds of things. And then the emotion that you brought to these two scenes. I loved who you made Vanessa into. And I think especially in that first scene when you'd say, "Sands," you know, my whole body would just get all shaky. It was like so excellent. And in the second scene, really acting out that scene was, I think one of the things was so riveting is I've often been struck by stories on stage that even though the actor is merely giving us the words on the page, you do feel like this physical action is taking place. And how you manage to accomplish that while also just simply being a face on a screen was astounding. Thank you so, so much. I have much to say. I was scribbling things like, "Oh my God, thank you." So I'll just have to write you an email, but thank you.
I'm incredibly humbled and very privileged. Thank you so much for your kind words. And truly, it's actor candy. I mean, as an actor, you know, this was candy. It was great.
it was candy. It really was amazing, Kellie. Experienced in a whole new way after reading. The scenes were powerful being read, but it was like adding a a layer of visceral experience to it. And oddly, I feel like this is one of those instances where Zoom, the format, almost makes it like a film, so that we were able to see all your expressions. And as Sam said, when you approached the screen and pulled back and leaned forward in your chair, and all of that you don't capture in an auditorium. So not that I'm glad we can't be together, but there are some benefits to the format in terms of performance. I don't know how you feel, Sue.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking the same thing, Dorothy, as I was, particularly in that second reading where you were, that scene is powerful in the book, but how you sort of, we came forward and grabbed the chin. It was like, oh my God, you know, you could really feel what was happening to the kid, and the sort of the fact that it's Scientology, and this is when Sam first hears about it. It's like, oh my God. So it was powerful.
Very
Kellie, I have a question. Did you know anything about Scientology or have opinions about Scientology before? And I don't know if you had a chance to read the whole book, but at least I know you read, and thoroughly and many times, these two sections.
Yes. I know a layman's knowledge of it. I've heard the words cult, and I've heard, I did watch a documentary on Netflix about people trying to just document them and the lengths that the church went to stop that process. So I saw some very heavy-handed tactics that they used. I have some friends who are very interested in it, and I haven't delved into it yet, but I've always been fascinated by cult behavior, so to speak. But as much as I know from popular media and the excerpts from Sam's is what I do.
Yeah, amazing. And Shelley is reminding us in the chat that go on to Rafflecopter and register for a copy of Sam's book and a copy of Deborah Gartney's book. Also, whether or not you win a copy, you can order it from Sam's hometown bookstore from the link on our site, or go to her site, sandshall.com. You can also get her amazing CD and hear more of that singing. That really was a riveting performance.
It was absolutely riveting. And I want to say again, as an actor, you know, performing those scenes, I remember a long time ago when my first novel came out, a sweetheart at the time saying to me, you should act your work more. And I was like, no, as a writer, I need to let the audience do that. But it was a really good comment, because I began to invest more of my training into actually giving it. But it was I think one of the things I just want to cry about is it was a whole new experience for me. I was absolutely just like, that piece about when I remember it so clearly when she said be a zealot, and I remember having all those images coming through my brain of what a zealot was in my understanding. And that's always like a favorite piece of mine to deliver, because it's kind of like this Shakespearean speech where you pile the images on top of each other. And I just loved how you delivered that. I was just like cheering inside, but also completely wrapped up. I mean, I kept wanting to put in, like, I see riveting and all these things going by chat, and I want to write, yes, but I didn't want to stop watching you. So I'm just so delighted. Thank you again.
I'm incredibly privileged for your words and the opportunity, and to kind of point to something you talked about. I come from alternative performance space kind of background with Kelly Ogden, who will be performing tomorrow night, her and her wife. We've done some alternative spaces. So I wanted to use Zoom and let that kind of inform the story, and let that kind of be kind of a meta-theatrical experience, hopefully, for all of you, that in this new format that's very different than being in person and that exchange between audience, to use the platform in a different way. And again, space sometimes and often informs performance and vice versa. So your prose allowed me to do that along with this technology. So I really appreciate again, actor Candy for getting this.
Yeah, you used the format, the venue of Zoom so well. I'm about to direct something on Zoom, and it was just kind of marvelous to go, oh, now that works, and oh, look how she did that too. You know, that's the other part of my brain at work. So it's just fantastic, really great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, so glad it worked. Wow.
Thank you, Jessica. Great piece of casting.
Oh, wonderful
Yes,
casting.
thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
As always. Stans, I just want to say that it's all in the 6 years that I was doing this, I had never had a writer say, "Oh, I could have done it better." You know? But writers are always astonished at what the reader, the actor, gets out of their words that maybe they didn't even know was there. And it's always a really, I want to, transformative is too strong a word, but it's always a very enlightening experience for the writer. And I'm wondering if you've ever had anyone else read your work, and if you felt that way.
No, in fact, I felt that completely. In fact, there was a wonderful thing where how some people, I got to do my own audio book, which was I had to fight hard for it, and it was a thrill to get it done. They were going to give it to an actor, and I was like, no, I can do it. I'm an actor. I can do it. I'm an actor. And there was a wonderful moment watching this where I thought, could she just read the whole thing onto video? Like people could just tune in and watch it from all over the world whenever they wanted to, because it was just so beautifully invested and done. And I was just delighted in every possible way. Very, very thrilled. Yeah.
So folks, this is your chance. If you have a question or comment, anything you'd like to say, put it in the chat or wave your hand. Shelley,
yes, I wanted to follow up on something that MJ typed in the chat, MJ Lemire, when she was asking how old you were, Sans, at the moment that you entered Scientology. So I was super interested in whether you think your biological age has anything to do with when you enter it. I'll just stop right there.
Oh, it's so great. And it was one of those moments where I didn't want to take more than a moment than type in the 2 digits, 3 and 1 away from, but it's true. It's very much on my mind. It's, I really do think that whether it's your physical age or your emotional age, Scientology particularly gets those at a certain point. And I think for me, it was not only had been the reason that the other part of the book is very much about this accident my brother had. Not only was I just devastated by just losing this mentor and friend, but and brother to this terrible accident. He didn't die, but he lost his brains. That had really helped to create the kind of existential horror that I think we all must face at some point. And I faced it when I turned 30. There was just a series of circumstances with a boyfriend and it doesn't matter. And I think I was just very, very open. And I think what's really interesting is that this gentleman who is older than I considerably was kind of courting me he wanted us to be lovers. It was very, very, another world that I just couldn't imagine occupying. But he would call me periodically. And he'd called one morning right about the same period of time and said, you sound sad. And I said, well, it's a beautiful morning, but I am sad. And I said, but hope springs eternal. And he made this little huff of irritation. He said, people always say that, and as if they just never take into consideration the rest of Pope's couplet. You know it, of course, he said. I said, I don't. And he said, hope springs eternal in the human breast. Man never is, but always to be blessed. And he said it with those emphases on never is, but to be blessed. And it just put me into such a sinkhole, that phrase. It's amazing that a piece of poetry could do that. But it was really right around that time that I agreed a second time to see Jamie and had tea with him and began, because I think it just helped to open up this place of tremendous despair. I think it happens for some people when they're 20. Some people when they're 27, but I think that dangerous area right around the 30s when it's like, oh my God, my life has not gone where I thought it was going to go, but where is it going? That we get very vulnerable.
Sands, one of the things that your book offered me was understanding how people can become part of one of these organizations, and then understanding how hard it was to leave. And it brought me so much, just understanding and compassion and respect. And I wanted to share that. I had to read the book every other night because it kept me up so early into the morning. I read it over 3 nights, and it was just painful to set down. And I loved Kellie's reading, and it was so fun to have that, but the book itself is that riveting. And but it also, I thought of when Sue said the word transform, it really transformed me, because what I took away in a really deep sense was the power of listening, and how, your family was so horrified and all these people are horrified, but nobody was really listening. And then the family friend stepped in, and it really has altered me. And I've been actively trying to spend time with people who have very different political beliefs and listen. I've been just really taking that profound wisdom, because it was so much what you needed, and everyone cared about you, but nobody was offering that. So I wanted to say thank you so much for that extraordinary awareness and gift.
Susan, thank you. It's really lovely to see you here today. And thank you for that amazing compliment. And you have brought me to tears, because that moment with Blair. Oh, what he did for me. He allowed me enough space to see myself and eventually be able to leave, because he listened. That's right. Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. And what a beautiful thing you're trying to do, to listen. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I've been meaning to send you an email ever since I read it, which was Christmas time. So I'm checking that off my list, but thank you.
Done. It's done.
Glorious book.
Thank you, Susan.
Better than an email.
But very moving, very moving.
Yeah, other comments, questions? Yes. Kathy.
Hi, Sands. So I actually have a comment and a little bit of a question, but this morning in the New York Times, I read an op-ed about a woman, maybe you've read it, who got engaged in right-wing organizations, and it happened to her really at a very similar time, a similar way. It's like she had nowhere to turn really to get love in her life, to get accepted, to have people be kind to her and want her around. And I just being able to make that comparison, having read the book, was just really, maybe really understand it so much better. So I think what you've gone through and your ability to express that has really, it can really open people's eyes to how that happens. So it's really a gift. And I think it's anyway, thank you again.
And thank you, Kathy, for being here. And thank you for that comment. And I'll hasten to say that I had love. I just didn't go to it. My parents caging to me. So, yeah. And it's funny.
It's what Susan said, that they weren't seeing you and hearing what you were going through. They were seeing it through their eyes and their experience. And that's a different level of empathy that you're helping people see through the book. So,
because I think with your family, it was set up as a battle, and that's how we set up so much, politically, or all these ways. I'm just seeing how it's set up as a battle, and then nobody's going to win. I mean, we know that as women, right? I mean, men, we know nobody's going to win. And so was that, it's just helped me see how often that happens.
And I think people are also looking for people to be on their side, whatever they're going through.
It's the side thing that Susan's talking about. I'm going to be on a side, I'm going to be on a side, as opposed to how can we, this work that Susan's trying to do right now, how can we just find these points of connection,
Right.
And that's what Blair did. He brought those books to the table and engaged me, and here's the good things and here's some weird shit, and it was really great for me to go, oh, there is weird stuff. And he likes it too. And it just opened up this place to be.
But he validated the power and the beauty of it, right? Where everyone else was just pushing against all of it. And he sat down and said, wow, these aspects really make sense. I really understand that truth and that draw and that wisdom. And so it was just so different, right? That so he could acknowledge both sides of you, the part that was engaged and the part that had doubt.
Yes, that wonderful statement. He said, you're doing exactly what a young woman your age should be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was liberating. You're examining spiritual paths and intellectual options. And, it was like, I am.
And he read all those books. He had read the Scientology.
Read the books, which was amazing.
He was a hero.
Sands, you talk about sort of the spiritual aspects, and one of the things in the book that really stopped me, I think your family had gone on a vacation to Mexico, and you had entered a cathedral, a sacred space, probably where people had worshipped for hundreds of years. And you went to your knees, and your father yanked you up to your feet and said, no, we don't do that. And I think from that point on in the book, I felt that I understood that you had, even as a child, you were drawn to the spiritual, and you honored it on your knees as a child, and you were immediately admonished for what you did. And so I felt like the joining into Scientology was that action by your family left you vulnerable, and it was a vulnerability that had that was present for a long time, until the moment when, at your most vulnerable, you succumbed to what you hoped was going to be a spiritual answer. That may be an unfair analysis, and I'd like to know, I'd like your response to that observation so that I might understand the book better.
Thanks, Kate, for reading that so closely. Yeah, it's just really one of the first family incidents I share, in part because my parents shared it so often. That we'd been in Mexico, that I'd been brought up. I had a little Nana that took me around, and she obviously went to church every day, and she hustled up on her knees to the front of the altar because that's what she did in her Catholic tradition. And so when we went to this church as a family, that's what I did too. And indeed, Dad yanked me to my feet, and I understood that he'd yanked me to my senses as much as he'd yanked me to my feet. That was what I was supposed to. But here, to me, is the thing that was interesting, is that my parents, and they very beautifully celebrated the concepts of spirituality. They very much celebrated the trappings of spirituality. We had Mom all of her life, until I think like George Bush was elected, and it became odd. She wore just huge numbers of huge silver crosses, but they were artifacts. They were lovely, beautiful things. We had crosses in our rooms. We had Virgin Marys on our walls. I mean, there were Buddhas, there was spirit houses. Spirituality was always around. It was just like, as I say in the book, you kind of visited as a tourist. You didn't, stay there. And, but I think one of the many aspects of the book that, and writing the book that was really wonderful, was to realize the connection, especially I had with my dad in this regard. And I note that in the book, when he goes down the Grand Canyon and he actually calls to say to me, I'm still in Scientology, there is something. And he's had some sort of spiritual, and that did do a lot to push something, pull something between us that was really precious to me. And I think in the end, again, something I quote in my book, when I say to my mother, well, I'm working for you, what are you working on? She says, and I explain, and I talk about, how fraught these years in Scientology are. And she says to me, and she was compos mentis there, she was in fine shape. She said, well, it's helped to make you who you are, and you seem pretty great to me. Aww. And those were really, really big things to me. I mean, they're in the book because I want to show this kind of arc of you know, that something came out of that between us too, in addition to inside of me, you know. So that was nice. But yeah, they were tough on the idea of religion. I think spirituality was kind of an interesting idea, but it wasn't anything that Halls did.
Yeah.
You know, Halls didn't do it, and I did. And so there we are. So
yeah, it did seem pretty clear throughout that the narrator from childhood was on a spiritual journey, looking for truth, looking for an answer, looking for comfort. And it all made sense in that context. But the family wasn't seeing that part, that need.
That's
not
right.
answering
It's a daily
that.
thing. It's just a daily count my blessings every day now. It's like, okay, you know, it's nothing specific, but it's mine and I've got it. And it's ongoing and it's big and it's sweet and it's, you know, huge. It's great. Yeah. So, you know.
Wonderful. Are we ready to do the raffle, Shelley?
Give me 1 minute.
Okay. While Shelley is doing, whirling the raffle copter around and picking our names, I was wondering, Sands, you know, you speak a lot about the hero's journey, and I love that quote. I'm not sure if it was in the book, but it was certainly in the essay I read about that Joseph Campbell said, "A well-lived life is one hero's journey after another." I love that. And I wondered if you're on a new journey or what you see as your next journey. And maybe that's a coy way of asking, what are you working on?
That's wonderful. You know, that was part of, to go back to the very first question you asked, Dorothy, that quote from Joseph Campbell, which is in his essay, The Self as Hero, which in itself is a little ancient book of his lectures called Myths to Live By. That phrase, which ends that essay, as far as I'm concerned, or phrase like that, a well-lived life is one hero's journey after another, was just such an eye-opener. It's not like you have one. It's not like, you know, you're Odysseus and you return home. And even Odysseus has to go off on another one, you know, when he walks off with his oar to go plant it somewhere. You know, there's just, they go on. So, of course, there's been several since I wrote the book, but I suppose at the moment, there's no particular underworld at the moment, which I'm really grateful for. But I'm also really conscious, Dorothy, that it is, all of these things are cyclical. And part of my desire is to be forewarned, so that, and it has made a difference. There have been little moments where I felt myself, oh, here it comes. And then there's a kind of wonderfulness, like, well, I don't think you have to go down there. Maybe you could just take the win and the boon and the gift and not go traipsing around down there for a really long time. You know, maybe there's a way you could just avoid that for now. So I suppose, you know, the only hero's journey that or if there's a journey, I don't think it's not right at the moment, just working a lot on singing and songwriting and, you know, the uses of poetry and creating elegant prose, and that stuff is really very, really high for me. And I would say also looking for how I serve best. That's really on my mind a lot. So in whatever ways that comes.
Yeah, well said. And we've got a lot of lovely notes in here.
Oh, is that right? I haven't been seeing.
Yeah, you haven't had time to read them, but it also sounds like we have a raffle winner.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay.
So first I'll say that we will do the same raffle tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. where we have a similar, though vastly different experience of a brilliant author of memoir and in history and a brilliant writer or actor. So we've got Deborah Gwartney, our author of I Am a Stranger Here Myself, and the actor Kelly Ogden, who I believe is here tonight. Not sure if she's still here. Kelly, are you still here? Unmute yourself if you are. And Deborah.
I am still here.
Yay, but your picture's not on, so waving at us doesn't make a difference.
Here, I will wave.
Nope.
I'll wave back.
Okay, yay. And Deborah, are you still here?
She is.
Oh, here I am. I'm getting eaten up by mosquitoes, so I keep moving around. But hello, I can't wait.
I just want to leap in to say that Deborah's book is so amazing because it's not only a really extraordinary memoir, but it takes you on this history lesson, and the way she folds together the history with her own life and what it is to be a Western woman. And I just can't speak enough about it. It's such a great book.
It's really special. Yeah, yes. Go ahead. Sorry, Deborah.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, then I get to say how much I just adore Sands' book and adore Sands. And gosh, tonight was just amazing. I didn't really know what to expect. I've just been sitting here astonished by how powerful it's all been.
Yeah. Wonderful. And tomorrow night will be as well. So if you're available for happy hour tomorrow evening, a similar experience. And yet for right now, there's only one winner of both of these authors' books, and that is Darlene Zimbardi.
Yay,
is Darlene still here?
Yay, Darlene.
Are you with us, Darlene?
Yes, thank you. That's so exciting. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes. Thank you, Darlene. That's so
and
good.
so I typed our email into the chat. If you would send us your address, we can send you the prize. Does that make sense, Shelley?
Yeah, and we have Darlene's email address from the Rafflecopter. We'll send it to her, letting her know what we need. Great. And so that will commute with Darlene that way. And Kelly, show your picture again so you can wave so we see tomorrow night's actor. You turned on your...
Hi, Kelly.
There's Kelly, yes. And so Kelly will be performing Deborah's piece tomorrow night.
Wonderful. And
if I may, Kelly and I are best friends. We share the same name, and you guys are in for a treat tomorrow night because she is a wonderful performer. So I hope you tune in.
I'll be here, front and center.
And MJ is asking, will there be a video? Yes, both of these performances are being recorded and ultimately will be posted on the Stories on Stage website. And of course, the authors can put them on their websites, whatever they wish to do, and the actors. So yes, the recordings will be available. Not immediately. We have to do some editing and stuff.
And if you're not yet a subscriber to the Stories on Stage Sacramento newsletter, please go to our website, storiesonstagesacramento.org, and subscribe. And we will always give the information first to subscribers. I'll say that our Sunday writing workshop with both Sands and Deborah, all the spots were taken. And if you're a subscriber, you get opportunities like that first.
Excellent.
That's great.
And with that, would you like to have the final word, Sands?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much to Stories on Stage, Dorothy and Shelley. It's just been such a joy communicating with you every step of the way. Sue, thanks for your extraordinary vision in all of this in the first place, and for the extraordinary interview, which I just enjoyed so much. Your questions were just superb. And Jessica, what great work you did as a casting director as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward very much to seeing Deborah and with Kelly with Deborah's work tomorrow. And Kelly, just huge thanks to you. What an extraordinary thing you did. I just used that adjective 3 times, but it's been an extraordinary night. So extraordinary work with the acting and reading of my piece. I'm not going to forget it. And I know the next time I read my own piece, I'm going to be, what did Kelly do here? So thank you so much. I'm so glad I'll be able to have a copy of this and be able to put it on my website, which I will do with great pride. And all of you who came, there's familiar names I see, and thank you so much for showing up and being part of this wonderful event. It just felt so cozy and fabulous, all of us together. So thanks, Dorothy and Shelley, for creating that, and all of you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. It was great. Hope to see you tomorrow night.
That was so much fun.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks.